Hey there. Hey, welcome to another episode of All Around Azure. I'll be your host today. My name is Jason Hand, and I've got a really great guest with me here who's just getting ready. And we're going to be talking about how to start coding when you don't know where to start. So let's go ahead and introduce our guest, and everyone say hello to Brian Benz. Hello, Brian. How are you?
Greetings, Jason. I'm good. How are you today?
I'm real good. I'm real good. I'm excited for our show. I think this one's going to be fun. There's a lot of really interesting news and stuff that you're going to share with us that I think is awesome to spread the word on. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's going to be a fun afternoon here. I will say just some housekeeping things before we get too carried away here. I'll be keeping an eye on chat. So if you've got questions about anything that's going on there in chat, just send us something there drop it in the chat, and I'll pass that on to Brian when it makes sense. And then any links, I know there's going to be a lot of resources that we're going to be sharing throughout the stream today. So any links that we have on that, I'll drop those into chat as well. And then we'll have a place for show notes and everything once we get this posted for the future. So, also another couple things. We've got some captioning working now on our show here, although it seems like it's just going to be working for Brian. You're not going to see captions from me. We can only point it at one source. So, yeah, with that, Brian, what kind of stuff are you going to be sharing with us today?
Hey. So today I'm going to talk about, how to start coding when you don't know where to start. All the way back to February of 2020, when I was still on the road. Used to go to different conferences and events, and one of the questions I was asked quite frequently is from newbie developers, "Hey, I really want to get started in coding, but I really don't know where to begin. So what advice do you have for me?" So what I did is I actually, a couple of weeks ago, actually more than a couple of weeks, a couple of months ago now, put together a blog post, which you can find at brianbenz.com. And it's how to start coding when you don't know where to start. And I'm going to highlight some of the things from that blog post today. I'm also going to talk about something that happened last week. Microsoft announced that they want to get 25 million people up to skill on different technologies. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too.
Sweet.
So we'll get started.
Yeah, let me pop over here and show your screen. You want to show us a few things?
Yes. Yeah, please.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and put your website here in our chat.
Sure. So can you see the screen?
Yeah, we're all set. Yeah, let's.
All right.
Let's.
So here's a blog post. This is where I'm going to get started. And by the way, I'm offering to mentor underrepresented individuals. If you have any questions or any info that you're looking for, please do contact me directly. Go to my LinkedIn profile, which I'll share a bit later, and just say that you'd like some help in the intro when you link with me. If you don't know what linked is I'm going to explain it a bit later anyway. But if you do, just connect with me there, and we can start a conversation. I'm happy to help. So the first thing I want to say is, people always ask, where do you start? Where do you start when you're actually working with coding? And for this, I'm actually going to flip quickly over to the announcement that was made last week by Microsoft. Here's the actual blog post that they had. Actually, that's not it. This is the official Microsoft blog post that they had. So they want to help get 25 million people worldwide skilled up on technical skills. And actually, it's beyond technical skills as well. So if you look at this blog post here that they created, and we'll post the links for this as well, you can see that basically they want to address the needs of about 25 million people. So get in quick, because if it's more than 25 million, they won't let you in. I don't think so. But anyway, we have a ton of resources. Microsoft has a little bit more resources than I do in my little blog post. And LinkedIn, GitHub, and Microsoft, which are all Microsoft-owned entities, are working together to get this done. And they've created this site called opportunity.linkedin.com. Now, the cool thing about this site is it has all kinds of resources for the top skills that people are looking for. And in this case, specifically towards technical skills. But there are other skills as well. And they have links you can use to explore courses, which takes you to Microsoft Learn, which I'm going to talk about a bit later, and some virtual collaboration tools you can play around with, and some tips and tricks on job searches as well, which is a great thing for LinkedIn. I've got this open already. One of the things they did is they created insights into a rapidly changing economy. So when you're trying to start out in a new career or a technology, you're going to get lots of advice from well-meaning people, and some of it's good. Some of it, you don't know. But how do you tell if the advice is good or not? The way I do it is backed up with data. So here's some of the data that LinkedIn has provided. And this, if you go to opportunity.linkedin.com, you can link to this report.
And I just dropped the link to that in chat for everyone too. If you go in there.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So this is based on data from 690 million LinkedIn members, 50 million companies, 11 million job openings, a bunch of skills, 36,000, and some schools, 90,000 schools. So who's hiring? Here's the top hiring people. And this is of May 2020. You can actually get other data for previous dates if you would want it. I'm not sure why, but you can if you want. So Amazon is the top hirer, Amazon and AWS, and then Microsoft's number 3, as a few other companies as well. What jobs are available? Software engineer, project manager, real estate agent, nurse. There's a lot of opportunities out there based on job postings. And we're going to focus today on the software engineering part of this and anything technical related. But this is a great resource for you to get the info that you need to perhaps start a new career in this current situation of uncertainty. And I kudos to Microsoft for putting this together. This is not the only resource, by the way. This is just a LinkedIn one. I'll get into the other resources in a bit.
Yeah, and I should also want to chime in and add that a lot of now I haven't been through every single thing, but I've spent a lot of time on Microsoft Learn, and I will say a lot of that stuff isn't really technical. There's a lot of great Learn modules and courses in there that are more geared towards, both non-technical people, but even folks who are maybe more in like a manager or leadership role. There's a lot of really good content, both in Learn and I'm assuming also on this new LinkedIn stuff that we're talking about. So
yes,
even though what we're going to go over today is more software engineering focused and how to get coding, there's all kinds of really great stuff in there that I think is worth checking out.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a little quick tour of Learn later and highlight the things that I think are really useful for beginner developers. So, but this is Learn. If you just search Microsoft Learn, you'll find it, and we'll post some links as well. So let's get back. So here's the insights into the economy based on what's going on overall, right? So now I'm going to focus in on coding. What do you do to figure out where you get started with coding, right? People are going to tell you, data science is the way to go. It's the future. Other people say AI. Other people, web development is a solid career with a good income. There's all kinds of advice you're going to get. All those things are true, by the way. The thing is, what do you want to work with? And there's two places that I like to go. Take the advice people give you and then go out and look at the data too. There's two different sources of data that are really good. There's Stack Overflow Developer Survey and the GitHub State of the Octaverse. I'll explain what both of these are in a minute. So Stack Overflow actually just recently published the 2020 Developer Survey. And what this is a survey of 65,000 developers from all over the world. You can see the methodology here. They had a lot from Europe, less from North America, and et cetera, et cetera. So whatever's relevant to your community is a great thing to look at as well. Break it down by segment. Sorry, I got a phone going in the background there. This is what it's like to work from home, folks.
Exactly. That's how we do things around here.
Yeah.
sharing workspaces with
We're,
others, and
yeah, we're all
fighting
the same.
for around my house. It's like coordinating when to do laundry and when to do the dishes and
Oh yeah.
all kinds
Oh
of
yeah.
fun stuff.
Anyway, sorry for that background noise.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, no worries.
I should have turned that off. But anyway, so the 65,000 people from all over the world, and they've done a lot actually with this survey this year. The developer profile, geography, developer roles is kind of cool, and here's the respondents, what they did. But that's not really what you came here for. If you want to learn how to get started with coding when you don't know where to begin, the best thing you want to go to is the technology section over here. Most popular technologies. Okay, so if you're looking to make a living as a coder or just for a hobby, it's good to work with large communities because large communities support each other. There's a lot of info out there that you can search to find things. You just basically have a lot of support. It's easier to learn things. So these are the technologies that are the most popular, and you can go for all respondents, hobbyists and professionals. Then you can go with professional developers as well. So JavaScript is the thing that basically, when you say popular, what does that really mean? I think it's more about the things people are using right now. And that's JavaScript, HTML, CSS, SQL. SQL is not necessarily a programming language, but it's more of a data retrieval language. And then Python, Java, and a few others. So you can get a good idea here. For example, if you want to get into AI, people are going to tell you that Python is the way to go. Artificial intelligence, Python, they really do go hand in hand. So you can see how popular Python is. And figure out which way you want to go. There's also, if you want to work on web front ends, there's web frameworks. The one that people use the most in a professional developer situation and hobbyists actually is jQuery, React.js. So these are the names. These actually, if you're a total newbie, might not mean much to you, but this is where you start, right? So I need to learn JavaScript. This seems like a really popular technology. If I want to go with AI, learn Python. And this is sort of going to help you figure out exactly what you want to do. And if somebody says, Ruby on Rails is the way to go, yes, it's a great platform, or Symfony or Gatsby, but you can see here it's not necessarily as popular. So you have to make a decision about what you want to do and what you need. And then this is an interesting one: most loved, dreaded, and wanted. Okay, so the loved is Rust. So Rust is a fairly new language, and it's getting a lot of very devoted adherents, and as you can see, it's growing. It's most loved. Dreaded, VBA, thankfully older technology from Microsoft. And Objective-C is a language that you use for writing web apps.
It's always good to see some of these at least make the top of a list, though.
Yeah, and one of the most valuable things
forever, but.
Yes. One of the most valuable things. These are the things that technologists would like to have that they maybe don't have now. So Python, JavaScript didn't go. So so once again, picking AI as an example. All right. So you want to work with AI, you want to work with Python. Great. It has a strong community. Also, it is the developer language that most people are interested in knowing. So there you go. That's a nice little triangulation of confirming that what you want to spend time on and devote a career to is currently popular and hopefully will be just as popular 5 years from now, which, by the way, is not always the case. Things do change in the technology world. It tends to be a little bit fickle.
I'd say for the most part, though, if you're going with one of the top, like say 5
Yes.
from any of these lists, like they've been around, or even if they haven't been around for a while, they've shown enough promise and support from the community and even professionals situations that they won't die off that fast.
Exactly. But if your uncle's telling you, I've made a solid career out of VBA, you might want to show them this before you actually devote a career to it. So, it's a good way to figure things out. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point too much, but And then developer environments and tools. And I'm going to talk about different developer environments. Windows is always way out front. Mac is always cooler. And Linux-based is really great if you really, really like working with command line. The three are, the popular operating systems that people use. Collaboration tools. We're going to get to GitHub in a little while. GitHub is a great platform for sharing and working with your code as well. And then Slack, Jira, Google Suites, Teams. Look, Teams is coming up, man. Teams is coming up there, coming up fast. This is February 2020. I would love to see these stats next year to see how the pandemic changed things. All right. And then researching tools. So how do you actually figure out what you're going to do? Free trials. So you can get a free trial, by the way, for Azure. I'm going to show you how to do that in a bit. And ask developers you work with. Once again, get that advice, but get some data. Visit developer communities. I'm going to show you that as well. So Stack Overflow and a few other things. So there's a lot of ways to get info. And these are the ways. Oh, okay. So if you're trying to start a career, top paying technologies is kind of what you'd like to have right now. Isn't that interesting? Perl and Scala seem to be near the top. Here's the thing. Perl is universally derided, depending on who you talk to. Not necessarily a popular language, but obviously pays well if you know it and understand it. Scala, Go. Did you want to jump in there, Jason? Do you have anything to?
I was saying in the chat actually that are there really any languages that have completely died off? Because even COBOL and Fortran and Pascal and some of those I feel like you hear about every once in a while, especially like I think is it COBOL, the one that a lot of banking systems are relying on? And
correct. A lot of government and banking systems still use COBOL. I know it well.
Yeah, and they need somebody to troubleshoot and modernize their systems. So I mean, I remember COBOL though, and it was not fun for me.
yeah, it's one of those things that it will pay well for good reason. It's painful, and but I got to say it's not necessarily painful. It's an extremely good, stable, reliable language. It's been around forever, and that's generally how good, stable, reliable languages are built.
And it helps you appreciate like how we've evolved moving forward, and how languages have gotten easier, and we use references, and instead of like explicitly line by line saying what's going to happen, there's just it helps you appreciate both the way things used to be done and the way things are done now. I think when you understand all of it.
The Buddhists have a quote, you must fully experience misery before you can fully experience happiness. And, I like that quote. But
exactly. Can you go into the US tab and see what that one looks like? We've got a request in chat. Yeah. Sure.
So Scala, Go, Objective-C. And by the way, if anyone wants to check this out later, insights.stackoverflow.com is where you go. And you can get all kinds of info for that. So, it's only slightly different for the US versus global. Now, the interesting thing, if you remember from the respondents, the overwhelming number of respondents were from Europe. So probably overall what you're seeing here is European bias, perhaps, in the data. But in the US, look at that. So global, wow, look at the way the price changes. 150. I just noticed that. So the salary's obviously a little larger here. And that's probably because there's a mix of developing countries and the US in the global salary rates. So yeah, still very good as well. And it tends to be pretty much the same. Things change a little bit, like Kotlin, for example. Let's see where Kotlin is down here versus Kotlin in the United States is near the top. So if you're from a developing country and you can get a remote work position, this is a great way to negotiate with whoever you're working with overseas.
And it looks like it shows the median number of, so like you can see there's a little over 7,900 responses for just the U.S. data there.
Yes,
so
7,000.
Give a little context on how many actually.
Yeah, and this one has 33,000. So anyway, not to deal too much on that, but top paying technologies, obviously, It's great to have technology can be a lot of fun. It's also really, really good to get paid for what you love. So great way, with a little bit of strategy, you can probably get both. So, okay. In terms of, this is an interesting graph. So this is how technologies are connected. So people who use Scala generally use Apache Spark and Hadoop. Ruby on Rails, not a surprise, uses Ruby. Let's see, Go. Go is interesting. So Go is primarily connected to Kubernetes, Terraform, Ansible. So they're talking about a lot of infrastructure, container-based applications. Elasticsearch is, something that people are using for doing search. It is a open source, and it's good for a lot of large companies are using it for their internal search. A lot of e-commerce sites as well, but obviously related to Go and Kubernetes. Redis, for those of you who aren't familiar, is sort of a key value pair lookup database. It's very popular online with all the cloud providers. Docker is for putting code into containers to share. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but this is kind of an interesting cluster. The Go, Kubernetes, Linux, Python, Bash, PowerShell. And over here, you've got some more AI-related things that are basically, so what we're looking at here in this cluster is Go for the programming language. Some of the AI-related technologies and frameworks like TensorFlow for doing work there, which Python is very much connected to. They run on Linux, and they tend to use Bash and PowerShell for administration. But this is a great way to kind of get your feet wet and see what you're going to need. By the way, yeah.
I was going to say, it's also a great way to know like the community layout and like what communities are adjacent or am I overlap, like somebody who is big into any Kubernetes communities, probably also has some interest or some connections to the Go community or the Terraform, something like that.
Exactly. So you want to find good, strong communities, and that's actually a good lead in. I think I'm going to move on from the Stack Overflow survey. You guys can check it out at insights.stackoverflow.com. And they have multiple surveys going back a few years as well. But this is a great way to discover what kind of communities you're going to be working with. And when you're looking at programming languages, you're probably going to have to learn more than one. You're probably going to have to learn Bash. I know personally, Linux, Bash, a little bit of Python, some Go, Redis, Docker, Terraform, Ansible. I know just enough about all of those to be dangerous, among other things on this graph. And that is really a way to provide a lot of value too, is to be able to communicate intelligently with all of these different communities. So if you're thinking you can learn one programming language and make a career from it, I guess it's possible, but generally you're going to have to adopt several different languages, frameworks, and knowledge. You don't have to be what they call a full stack developer, which is basically knowing all of this. If you look at some of the recruiting posts, but you will have to know a subset enough to be not fluent, but communicative with other technologies and other specialists on the team you're going to be working with.
It helps to know like the limitations of one thing over another, and regardless. And also, there's just there's a lot of people have their own versions of what full stack means. But I think you're right. Like, it's not necessarily important for someone to know how to build literally the entire stack, but to have an appreciation and understanding and know what can do what and what can't do what. I think is great, especially if you're trying to build a career around, if you want to be a Go programmer. What other things should you just be part of your tool belt in terms of knowledge?
Exactly. And we were talking about COBOL. You could make a career back in the olden days being a COBOL developer. There would be someone else who handled the operating system and everything else, and you would just have your terminal and you work on COBOL all day. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. The real skill these days, there's my phone again. The real skill these days is not knowing everything. The real skill is knowing where you can find out everything quickly. Okay, and that's actually what we're going to go to next. We're going to talk a little bit about what Stack Overflow is in a second. But let's move on from the Stack Overflow survey and let's go to another very, very valuable source of information, which is state of the Octaverse. So octaverse.github.com. So instead of asking people to fill out a survey, GitHub, which is basically the world's largest repository of code that can be shared and communicated, what they do is they analyze their repos. So for those of you who aren't familiar, total newbies, when you're working with code, you have to put it somewhere. Up until 10 years ago, that was on your local machine only, and maybe you shared it on a file share somewhere. And then Linus Torvalds, who created Linux, also created Git, and Git is a tool that you can use to collaborate and share code. And correct me if I'm wrong on that history, Jason. Can't remember exactly how it came around, but Linus was definitely involved to a certain extent on building Git. And then there was a site called GitHub that was created, and GitHub is a place where not only can you use Git, but you can actually share your code. And the big innovative feature of GitHub was they had these things called free repos. So free public repos. You could put your code on GitHub totally for free and share it. So that's called a repository, short for, repos is short for that. And that is generally the de facto. There are others. There's GitLab as well and a few other smaller competitors. But GitHub is generally the standard place where people go to post their free code and share it. A lot of open source projects depend on GitHub for their storage and for sharing and for updating their code. So there's sort of Git and GitHub is sort of a version control and a collaboration tool, a communication tool for developers, and a place to store code. So what they have is 44 million plus repositories all over the world, and there is 80% of contributors to code is from outside the US. So that's kind of interesting. 10 million new developers joined GitHub last year. And by the way, Microsoft bought GitHub, I can't remember, about like a year and a half, 2 years ago or something. And since then, there was a lot of worry about that. People are going, oh my God, Microsoft's going to mess this up. We actually did it really well. Not only did we by GitHub, we opened up, for example, there's public repos and private repos. So the first thing we did is we said private repos can be free as well. So we gave those away for free. And then we used to have public and private for free, but then you had to pay if you used a team on your private repo. We actually opened that up for free as well recently too. Now there's certain limitations on that, and we still do charge fees for certain things. But for the most part, for beginning developers, you should have a GitHub account. You should set that up. And this is where you can go and get code, and this is where you can share code. If you find, for example, if you're working with Go, there's a lot of open source projects and a lot of open source tools that are out there. And you might find one that you want to work with. So if you're like me, I actually don't learn very well step by step going through code. What I really love doing, I love going out to GitHub and I do what they call fork a repo, which is basically take a copy of a repo, put it into my account, and then I go through the code and see how someone else wrote that code, and then figure out best practices from that, or maybe I pick up some bad habits. I don't know. But it's, for me, the quickest and easiest way for me to learn a new language and start working with a new language. So that's what you do. You go out, you find some code you like, and you start working with it.
Yeah, and
so that's a little bit.
I think GitHub too is it's a really great place to kind of do what you were just saying, but discover new ideas and discover new languages and discover communities around languages just by just going, even if you don't have an account yet on GitHub, just go and search for, pick a term. And yeah, it's fun to see all the projects that people are doing. And then, like you said, fork them and look at it a little closer and just get your hands on it. Really fast, really easy.
And then you can start making changes, and you can do something called a pull request, which is actually you're requesting that your changes get merged into the main project, which is basically how GitHub works, open source. So This is the state of the Octaverse report, as I mentioned before, octaverse to github.com. So basically, GitHub takes all of their repos and they anonymize the data and they start looking at what people are doing with the repos. And here's what we have. So 40 million plus developers on GitHub, including 10 million new users in 2019, 44 million repositories, 44% more developers created their first repository. And I suspect that'll be more this year. And pull requests merge. So that's what I mentioned before, where you contribute code to someone else's project, to someone else's repo. That's a pull request. So what happens is someone will receive that pull request and then they'll merge it if they approve the changes. And then your code is now part of their code. And the pull request merged last year, 28% more developers opened their first pull request. The other thing that's there is you can post issues. So it's not necessarily a change, but you had some problem with their code. You can post an issue on GitHub and say, hey, this code didn't do what it expected. It crashed on a Mac when it doesn't crash on Windows or something like that. You can just put that out there so everything's recorded. And then the developers of the code or you yourself can fix the code, issue a pull request, and then close the issue. So that's kind of how that works. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into GitHub, but I'll just focus more on the report now. So total students. So there's a lot of students out there, a lot of teachers using GitHub. And there's a student developer pack you can get for GitHub as well. And there's 19.8 thousand active schools using GitHub in their curricula. So that's kind of cool. Let's see. Let's get down to some of the more meaty stuff if you want. So this session is all about learning how to code when you don't know where to start. Let's get into that. This is more of a victory lap for GitHub, which is fine. Okay, so total contributors outside the United States. Where open source is growing. This is interesting. So Nigeria, Iran, Kenya, this is truly a global report. Growth of open source contributors, Hong Kong, holy cow. 77% for Singapore, several other countries. Contributions, let's see. Trying to get into more of the programming languages here. Let's try and get into there. Interconnected community. Oh yeah, here's a good one. 3.6 million repositories depend on the top 50 open source projects. So remember, you can fork things and then you can use your code combined with their code to build something. You can send a pull request back and merge the code, or you can build and the fork means generally that you're going to take it and do whatever you want with it. So you could actually take it and build your own based on the license in the code that's there. So you can see that there's a lot of open source dependencies. So 3.6 million open source projects rely on just 50 open source projects on GitHub. Let's see. Maven packages. So Maven is generally Java, so there's a lot of Maven packages being delivered. So average package contributors and dependencies by package language. So this will tell you that Java has a lot of dependencies in their applications. Pip is Python, so there's a lot of dependencies from Python to others. Node, anybody who's worked with Node.js, yeah, I'm not surprised by this number at all. For those of you who can't see, it's 3.5 million dependent projects, and there's only 35 direct contributors to NPM packages that 3.5 million dependent projects rely on. So there's an opportunity right there. If you get involved with some of these packages that have a lot of dependencies on them, that could be quite a valuable thing for the marketplace. Now, when you're working with Node.js, it's a JavaScript-based language. And if you remember back on the Stack Overflow, JavaScript is a great way to go as well. So if you're purely looking for job opportunities, working with learning JavaScript, learning Node.js, and then working on one of these projects that 3.5 million packages depend on, if you know that package, chances are people are going to be interested in hiring you. I mean, it's not the only skill you're going to have, but that's definitely a selling point for your resume. If you've actually worked on and contributed, if you're one of these 35 direct contributors, who contribute to code projects. The 3.5 million packages rely on. So you get the idea here. There's a lot of information you can get here, and you can sort of triangulate and figure out where you want to be in terms of your career and or hobby, and the need and demand that is there now and might be in the future. TensorFlow. TensorFlow is an AI framework, and it's a way to work with popular packages. Most of the cloud providers' AI supports TensorFlow. And there's a lot of people, 10,000 contributors, direct contributors, community contributors that have contributed to TensorFlow. Dependencies, not necessarily TensorFlow itself, 25,000. All right, so I don't want to read the whole report to you. You can check it out at octaverse.github.com. But let's look at, okay. So VS Code is an open source code editor. I'm going to show you this in a little bit. These are the top projects by contributors. So people who actually contribute. Azure Docs. So Microsoft actually writes all of their docs in Markdown, and they use GitHub to manage the version control and everything. So that's why this is pretty high. We accept pull requests from outside, but as well. Mm-hmm. So you can see anyway, so these are the major projects. So the major projects by contributors that people have. So VS Code's a good one to check out. TensorFlow, obviously. React Native is from Facebook. It's a application based. So when you're looking at Facebook on a web client, you're going to see React Native running. Kubernetes is for orchestrating containers. Ansible is for building infrastructure on the cloud. And there's a few other things too. Let's see, fastest growing. Hey, look at that. ASP.NET seems to be the fastest growing open source project. So this is beyond language. So once you figure out the language you want, then the open source projects that you want to work with you necessarily want to work with some big ones, or you can build your own. But this is a great way. Once again, there's a strong community around these open source projects because these are the ones that have the most contributors. So there's going to be a lot of information on how to work with these technologies. So that's really useful for a newbie. All right. So these are some of the new projects. Yeah.
I was going to say, this feels like a pretty comprehensive list on both tools and languages in terms of figuring out what, I guess, path to go down. Like if you really are starting from scratch, then what happens after you've picked like your own language and you're ready to kind of move forward?
Right. You've got to pick a technology, you got to pick a language, and then you got to say, okay, what am I going to do with this? And you can say something vague like, oh, I'm going to work with AI, but how? So if you go in here, you can see the TensorFlow project is very popular. Check out the TensorFlow project. See if this is something you think you'd like to work with. Learn what it is and figure out if it's a fit for what you'd like to do. So here's some of the things. Actually, I've been scrolling down trying to find this stuff, which is near the bottom of this report. So top languages, just to triangulate again with Stack Overflow and the advice you get from other people. Look at this. So TypeScript is actually growing. C#, C+, seem like solid careers. PHP, still there. Java, Python, and JavaScript, of course. So JavaScript is for Node and things like that. Python, of course, is AI. Java is big data, AI, legacy applications. So once again, this is a great way to check out the trends of GitHub. So these aren't respondents filling out a survey this time. This is actually analysis of what people are really using on their repos on GitHub. And the fastest growing language is Dart. Interesting. Rust, no surprise there. That's what the Stack Overflow says as well. Kotlin, a Java-based, JVM-based language, and a few others. So there's a bunch of different languages here. PowerShell, I debate if it's a language. I'm sure I welcome your letters. But yeah.
I think so. I think you got to count it.
It's like Bash. It's exactly. Not intended to be a language.
I don't know why Bash isn't there.
But people write volumes of bash code to do some pretty incredible things sometimes.
Guilty.
Bash, by the way, for those of you who don't know, it's a basically a command line utility for working with Linux based applications.
In chat, we've got the comment that Bash and like PowerShell 2 are scripts, technically, but do the same, have the same result.
Yeah. The old school developers will tell you, well, it's not a programming language because it doesn't have this and that and this. But people do use it to write automated things that look a lot like programs. So,
are you familiar with Dart? Someone's asking if Dart's like Xamarin. Do you know much about that?
Dart? I'm drawing a blank of what Dart is again. I don't know. I don't know what that is.
I haven't touched it either.
I'm surprised.
It's like Dart. Dart.dev.
We're learning along with you folks. So Dart is one of the most popular languages. I'm going to check it out.
It looks like it's a Google product. Yeah. It's made by Google. Optimized for UI, productive development. Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
We'll have to look at that.
I kind of
looks similar to
myself on being up to the date on the trends, but obviously I missed that one. So Dart. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. And then data science. So there's a whole bunch of information here in the Octaverse about data science, which pretty much everybody will tell you is a hot and growing market, and it combines AI with data processing and a bunch of other things that are extremely in demand these days. So data science is actually a pretty good career path if that's the way you want to go. And that's it. So there's all kinds of info there. So let's talk about what underlies all this now. So the next thing I want to talk about, once you've got your data, you've figured out, what language you want to use. Maybe you've found some GitHub projects that you want to work on. So where do you go from here? And the good news is the first thing you can do, and you can do this today if you haven't done it already, is sign up for a bunch of accounts. They're all free. So the first one, of course, I showed you the state of the art, for GitHub. Sign up for a GitHub account and make sure that you've got a profile in there and everything like that. The next thing you want to do is sign up for a Stack Overflow account. So Stack Overflow is this, the insights of Stack Overflow are over here. That's the survey they do every year. But what Stack Overflow is actually useful for is if you're looking for solutions for problems you're having writing your code. So there's really, really great documentation out there. I'm going to share some of that on Microsoft Learn and other sites in a little bit. However, sometimes you're going to run into problems, and it seems like an obvious thing that should work, and it doesn't. So what do? We can sit there and bash your head like I do most of the time. And then you can check out Stack Overflow to see if someone has actually had this problem before and has solved it. So let's see one here. So it's Java. So Java, Quarkus, Kafka. It's okay if you don't know what any of this means. But basically, this guy has some code that he's written, and he's having trouble with it. And some people are going to answer this. And let's see. Oh, and there's some job postings over here too.
One of the things that I find interesting about Stack Overflow is whenever I come across an error that I can't figure out myself, and just like you're saying, step one is to go to Stack Overflow. You can usually just put it in your favorite search, browser, agent, whatever, Bing or Google, just the exact error, and it almost always points to a Stack Overflow article, like first couple links.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a great point. I forgot to mention. Yeah, this is what professional programmers do, folks. I mentioned before, you don't need to know everything, but you need to know where you can find everything quickly. So that's one of the techniques. You get an error message, cut and paste it into Google, see what happens. And sometimes you get an answer, sometimes you don't. But usually the answer is here in Stack Overflow. So here's a good one. I used Java. That wasn't a great example, but here's a good one. So have a web server written in Node.js, and you want it to launch in a specific folder. So Node is the command used to start Node.js, and then server.js is a JavaScript application, and then this is the name of the folder that he's trying to run. So here, server.js is my server code. And so we got 32 answers. And by the way, sometimes people can be, I shall say diplomatically, a little terse when it comes to newbies and stuff. Don't let that bother you. On Stack Overflow, some people are, there's trolls everywhere. Some people like to just troll people here. But there are some really, really good, earnest, honest, helpful people here who can help you as well. Sometimes you have to sift through a few troll posts, but you really will find the answer to your problem. And I highly recommend, you'll get slapped for this if you do it, highly recommend looking for the answer before you just ask the question.
Yeah,
because,
that's usually like the main trolling type of message you get or you see is someone who's been on Stack Overflow forever and has been part of solutions forever, scolding a new person for not doing their homework. But by and large, there are more people on there who want to help than there are who are just jerks about it. But yeah, you got to watch out for the occasional person who might be a little abrasive when they come across them.
Yes, so definitely sign up for your Stack Overflow account. I forgot to log into mine, but this is a great way to go. So, and don't be discouraged by those people who are a little bit abrasive when it comes to newbies. Just move on, and you'll find your answer out there. So that's a cool thing. So GitHub, so you can start finding communities and storing your code. Also, Stack Overflow, so you can find answers to things. The other thing I would sign up for is LinkedIn, believe it or not. So LinkedIn itself has a great. It's funny how it's a lot of people I speak to who are newbies don't have this basic thing. So you don't necessarily have to be technologically savvy or anything else, but you do. You need a LinkedIn account. This is the first thing I tell students to do. Go and get a LinkedIn account, set up a profile. It doesn't have to look great. You might not have a lot of experience, but the great thing is you can set up and you can do searches on topics you like, and you can actually connect with people that you're interested in connecting with. And I mentioned before, I'm happy to help mentoring. If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, it is linkedin.com in Brian Benz. We'll post a link later. But you can connect with me. Just say you like some help, you're a newbie, or you heard this from my blog post or from this video, and I'll connect. And the reason why I want to show you this is you can connect. Like, I've got a lot of people I connect with. Let me see here. So I've got. Where's the stats on this thing? Maybe it's in my profile. View profile. And I don't have a premium account. They're going to push you to sign up for a premium account. You don't need that unless you're actively looking for a job. That's a useful thing. But let's see. So I post my experience, a bunch of other things here. And I also have connections with a whole bunch of people. So there's tons of people I connect with in my network. All kinds of things going on. And actually, let's go to
the links to both of our profiles in chat.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks. So what I do is because of the people I follow and the topics I follow, I get a pretty good set of information about things I'm interested in, projects I'm interested in, people I'm interested in, and other things. Another cool thing you can do on LinkedIn is say you've decided you want to be an AI developer and you want to be the best AI developer you can be. You can start stalking people here on LinkedIn. I'm kidding. But you can check out how they got to where they are, because everybody publishes their work history. And you can see how they actually arrived at the destination that perhaps you want to arrive at as well. So that's a kind of a good way to go in and check out what other people do. There's link and there's follow. So in LinkedIn, you can actually follow people. So you don't necessarily need to link to them, but you can follow them. And when you follow them, you're going to get a notification like this when somebody posts something. Also, if you link to them as well, then you can link to them, connect. Some people will say they are, what do they call them? Open linkers or lions and things like this. That means that they accept all links. So if it's someone who you're interested in, in their background and skills, and they say Lion or Open Linker or something like that, just go ahead and feel free to link with them. And it's sort of build a community for you.
Yeah. What's your personal policy on that, Brian? Do you accept all invites to link?
It depends. It depends. I got a link the other day. I generally accept all links. In fact, great example. A couple of days ago, I got a link and I opened it up and I said, "Hey, great to meet you. Did you connect because of my blog post or something?" And I got kind of an automated post back saying, "Hey, no." She just said, "I'm really, really glad to link with you. I provide certification training on It was totally inappropriate, and I just unlinked them right away. So
yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at, is because I go through cycles where I'm like, I'm wide open, I want to be friends with everybody. That's I don't know, a big part of like what we do is just make connections and help people. But then there's every once in a while there'll be an experience where I kind of regret being open, but anyway, my own personal one is I'll accept a link to anybody as long as there's an introduction of how we met or how we first learned of each other. So a lot of times when we're on tour or at an event, I'll say, "Hey, connect with me on LinkedIn. Remind me that we, chatted here in such and such city." And then that helps me make a connection in my brain about who that person is when they reach out. 'Cause it's hard to keep track of people's faces with their handles and their names and their social media lives and all these things. So provide context, I guess, is the thing when you reach out to somebody on LinkedIn and say where maybe you met and, just a little bit of info.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's really important. Yeah. If Nemberly, what did I need some water. But generally speaking, when I see a invitation where the person has no connections, no common connections, so nobody that they know knows me, and it's an empty profile, meaning there's no history or anything like that, and it's the standard greeting, which is just, Jason Hand wants to link with you. I ignore those. But if you have one of those things, if you have a profile that looks like you've put some time and effort into it, if you have people linked to you that I know, I will probably connect with you as well. And most importantly, the message that you send. Don't use the standard default message. Use a message to explain why you're connecting with anyone.
It helps.
And you'll get way more connections. In fact, if you don't do that, you might even be reported as spam, because there are spammers out there on LinkedIn, unfortunately.
I'm much more, I'm reluctant to not only accept, but even help anybody who just kind of cold connects. But if they came in and said, I want to chat because I saw you on this, or I talked to you here, and then I immediately can make the connections. Oh, I remember that person and what we talked about and how I was thinking I could help them. Let me do, whatever that is. Maybe that's connecting them with somebody else. Maybe that's introducing them to some tool that they've never seen. Anyway, lots of different ways if you can, I guess, understand at the beginning why our relationship should be formed.
Yes. Yeah. There has to be some effort put into the profile for me. And if it's not, it's either a spam or it's a recruiter who's just madly cutting and pasting the same greeting for everyone and trying to get as many connections as possible. So, anyway, I think we made the point. So LinkedIn is a great community to join in on. You'll find connections there. And last but not least, everyone probably has this already, but a little site you might have heard of, twitter.com. So Twitter is a great place. You have to curate your connections, though. So it can be a great place or a terrible place. In my case, I connect to everyone on my team at Microsoft, people that I know, people that I admire, and I only select topics and people that are going to enrich my Twitter feed, and I'm constantly pruning or adding people based on that. So I get a pretty good, if I want to get some breaking news on something, I tend to get the breaking news pretty quickly going through Twitter. And what I'm talking about is something like, this company was purchased, I can go over to Twitter and I can usually do a search, and through my connections and the topics that I'm following, I can get pretty good info on that right away. And every morning I go through my LinkedIn and my Twitter, and I see what's happening in my little world of developer relations and Java and coding. And as long as you manage and curate it, it can be great. It can be a pain as well. I know a lot of people are kind of depressed with some of the things they see on Twitter, but and some of them rightfully so to be depressed. But it's a great place to go if you can curate and find information there. So anyway, I also follow like I'm a bit of a news junkie, so I follow all the British newspapers, Australian, all over the world, aside from the U.S. media, the U.S. Media Plus. So it's kind of a cool thing to do. There's one of my colleagues, Donna Sarkar, and she's talking about a conference that's coming up, actually. So that's the kind of thing that's actually really great to I'll just retweet her right now while we're talking, because she's going to be doing that live. If you're looking for something to do, oh, it's already over, actually. Never mind. Great example, Brian. Okay, so Twitter, LinkedIn, Stack Overflow, and GitHub. Just go sign up if you haven't already and start managing and curating your communities that you want to work with. It's a great way to go. So that's that. So the next thing I want to do, so you've figured out what you want to do. You've started connecting with some people, some topics and communities. And where do you want to go after that? The next thing you probably want to do is start learning some code. You want to write some hello world. And to do that, you're going to need a developer environment. So there's a couple places you can go. How much time do we have? Okay, I'm going to go over this real quick, and then I'm going to move on to. Okay, cool. I'm going to go over this real quick, and then I've got a lot of time to spend on tutorials and where you can find info there. So what I use is Visual Studio Code. You can download it. It is available on Mac, Windows, and Linux. It's free. It's actually open source. You can get it from GitHub, and you can play around with it. The application itself is what they call an integrated developer environment, an IDE. And here it is here. So what you've got is over here on the left, you've got your code that you're working on. When you're working on a project, you're probably not, for the first time, you're probably going to have one file here. But this is actually a website that runs over here. I can show you the actual website, tailwindtraders.com. And this is the source code for it. So tailwindtraders.com is probably a little advanced for newbies, but this is actually a website that's an example e-commerce website that we built. It's available on GitHub as well. It's open source, and it uses several different technologies to build this site. It's a great place to go if you know a little bit about coding and you want to learn best practices and learn how to work with the cloud. But basically, this is the, this is the source code, and it's running in Visual Studio Code. Now, you can edit code in here. You can run code in here through this little button, and it runs multiple languages. You can also post things out to GitHub using this thing called a GitHub pull request extension. So what's an extension? Extension is something that helps you work with the languages you're working with. In this case, I can work with GitHub, for example. I don't need to know all the command lines for working with GitHub. Let's say I just change this to $199. So I changed that. You'll see over here on the left, the change happens over here. So it tells me there's one change. Now, when you're working with GitHub, actually when you're working with Git, you have to do three things. You have to stage and then commit and then push. So it's really easy here. You don't have to remember what is that command for staging, and am I going to stage the wrong thing? Am I going to stage all my code? Am I going to screw this up? So basically just hit stage changes. It's kind of nice. This is the Fisher-Price version of GitHub and Git. For those of you who remember the toy company. And then you can commit, so I can say change shipping to $199. Okay, hit enter. There you go. So then I can push these changes to my GitHub repo, push. So that's actually going to push my changes to the GitHub repo, and I didn't have to remember any of the commands for that, which can be a little daunting when you're a newbie. And let's just look out here really quick. This is not a GitHub tutorial, but I just want to show you real quick how this works. So here's my repositories. If I refresh this, Tailwind Traders website's at the top because that's the most recent one. It's just changed. And if I look at the commits, here's the Tailwind Traders website, and here's my commits. Here's my most recent commit, changing the shipping to 199, and it tells you what code you changed. So it tells you actually what code you changed there. So you can see GitHub is kind of a way to manage your code and share versions. And imagine you have 100 different developers working on this. So you'd have a whole bunch of different things going on that would change that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's not just for saving your code and version controlling it, but it's also collaboration. Like you and I are working on a project right now where we've got you've allowed me access into your repo, and we communicate to each other, through the pull requests and through the different things that go in within GitHub. So it's very useful to just stay on top of what's going on within the code base.
Yeah, I'm going to call out one thing. So Microsoft is very sensitive to current events, and I still have the branch master in here, and I have an excuse for that. Most of the branches I have, most of the things I have are moved from master to main because it's more of an acceptable term for something that is the central version of your code. I haven't changed this one. I have a good excuse, because there are a whole bunch of dependencies behind the scenes that have to change before. And so they're working all those. It takes time, but as soon as those are all changed, I'm going to change this to main as well. So in case anybody knows that, it's the master to main that we're looking at doing. Scott Hanselman has a great write-up on this, and you can just search for Hanselman master to main, and you'll see all kinds of details on what Microsoft is doing.
Actually,
it's a work in progress.
I just put Scott's blog post in the chat for everybody, because it is it's great. It shows you exactly the steps to change everything over to main, as well as all the background on why we're all doing this. So definitely give it a read.
Absolutely. So that's one thing. In case anyone knows that, I just want to mention that. But we are posting that. So basically, getting back to the code here, so it's kind of a cool tool. It does actually allow you to do a lot of work with third-party tools. And the reason why I wanted to show you that is this is an extension. It's not a part of the core product. But there's a whole bunch of extensions you can use to connect to things. And here's another one. So I can actually connect to remote locations. I can connect to WSL. I can connect to a virtual machine out on the cloud. I can also connect to something called code spaces. And I'm going to tell you what code spaces is in a bit. But I want to talk about the GitHub Marketplace a little bit. Where is that now? I have too many windows open.
And I put a link to the Marketplace in chat for everybody as well.
Thank you. Yes. Let me see here. I'm going to close a few more of these, get rid of these. These are a little preview of what I'm going to show you later. There it is. Okay, so Visual Studio Code extensions. There are literally thousands of extensions. Here's a good one. Google created the Go programming language. The most popular IDE for Go is Visual Studio Code because of an extension that was created. So there's actually several extensions that are created, but the 3.5 million people have downloaded the Go extension. So what I can do is I can actually install this, and I have full support for Go inside my IDE. So you can customize this, and that's pretty cool. Let's see. Yep, there we go, install. So it's actually going to install it directly into my Visual Studio Code, and it'll show up over here as one of the icons for extensions a bit later. So that's kind of the cool thing. So that's how you do it. You set up your IDE the way you want it, and it runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux, totally free, and you can work with that. There's another thing I want to show you. If we go back to GitHub real quick, my repos. Let's go back to my repositories. So I have to go right to the top of this thing. That's one of the apps we have. And I want to go to my repo. So if I go here, your repositories. Now, one of the cool things here, and this is not free. This is, you have to pay for this, unfortunately. And it's in preview right now. But if I go into my Tailwind Traders website, normally what you do is something called clone. So you clone the repo that you have out on the cloud in your local machine, because you got to work with the code somewhere, right? You can also do this things called open with code spaces. So code spaces, I have one open that I used 13 hours ago. And this is basically online. So this is 100% online, and there's a small fee for this. But if you don't have anywhere local that you can work on code, this is integrated with GitHub. It's really, really new. But basically what it does is it creates a full IDE, and you have the Visual Studio Code interface that you're used to here. And that's something that you can use to edit. So I can actually, let's see here. I can go in here so you can see I can actually find the same code that I was just working with, and I can change it here if I want to. So that's kind of cool. And that's the sort of thing you can do. And you do have IDE features, you have type ahead, you have all kinds of things that you normally have with IDEs. But this is a great way to get started as well. So if you don't have access to a desktop, a computer of any kind that you can use, you can still use this. You can use Visual Studio Code. But I'm going to show you a trick. I mentioned before, this one's free. Here's one that's not, I'm sorry, it's not free, but this one is free. Shell, Azure.
Yes. That's what I was just going to ask if you were going to show off this one. I just shared this with Brandon in last week's stream.
But
I think this is a slick way.
Yes. So you can do things like I mentioned before. So this is worth the price of admission for those of you who paid for this seminar. I'm kidding. Nobody paid. Okay. So here's the code here. So I mentioned before what you can do. If I go back to my regular GitHub, you can clone this, right? So I can clone this Tailwind Traders. I can open with code spaces, which opens it in the browser and opens my GitHub version of this. Or I can go into shell.azure.com. Hopefully it goes in. Come on, shell.azure.com. Might have to get back to this. Yeah, let's get back to this. A couple other things I want to show you, because we're actually, I'm surprised we're kind of running out of time. So I already talked about, and by the way, all this stuff is kind of highlighted. Okay, cool. All this stuff is kind of highlighted here on my blog. Visual Studio Code, I talk about code spaces, and then you can sign up for a free trial. So I do want to show you that. Let's see. Create your free Azure account today. You get 12 months of free services. There's all kinds of stuff to do there. In my blog post, in the interest of fairness, I've provided the others as well. There's other cloud platforms other than Azure. Ours is, of course, the finest that you'll find out there. But it's kind of crazy these days. I don't know. I remember the olden days when you had to buy a $3,000 computer to get started with coding. These days, you can get a free cloud account. You can get free IDEs. Visual Studio used to cost a ton of money. It was worth it, but it used to cost a ton. It still does cost a ton of money. It's still worth it. But if you want to do some basic coding and get started, there's all kinds of free resources to help. Free resources to help you. Not least of which is the Microsoft Skilling that I mentioned before. So we'll share the links with that too. There's all kinds of resources there I haven't even talked about. There's there's career paths for starting with different roles inside IT and stuff like that. Okay, that's still working. It normally doesn't take this long, folks, but yeah. This is the Cloud Shell. So what this is actually doing is it's connecting to the cloud through my browser, and it's opening. It can open in PowerShell or Bash. I think it was taking a while because it was in PowerShell, and it has to nag me to upgrade. But you can open in PowerShell or Bash. And when you open in those applications, You can do all kinds of things. All right, I just killed it again. Great demo, right? All right, let me talk about this other stuff first, though. While that's baking, I have other things to show you. So inside the blog post as well, I do talk about where you can sign up for free accounts, and you can get your free IDE. And then there's free tutorials out there, which are pretty amazing. And hold on, there's a couple other things I want to show you too. If you're only interested in front-end web development, which is a solid career, as I mentioned before, this is a really good site, JSBin. So JSBin is kind of a cool thing. You can just run some code. Over here, you can build the code, and over here, you're going to get output when you say whatever you change. So title, you can change the title to JS Hey, and it'll actually run and allow you to do stuff. You got HTML. You can do CSS, JavaScript, and they've got a console as well, which is actually what I'm trying to show you with that other window in a second. But this is a great way to work with your code, and they have sort of a freemium model. You can buy space to store your code and share your code as well, and CodePen as well. So CodePen is the same idea. You can start coding. There's all kinds of things you can do with the code. You can do HTML, CSS, JS. And you can, once again, you can purchase additional features. But for newbies, this is a great way to just start playing around with HTML, CSS, or JS. Let's say you want to go to Node, and you've decided you want to work on one of those projects that I showed you in the Octaverse report. You can start playing around with JavaScript here just to learn how to work with JavaScript. And you get instant results. So everything is right here in the browser, and they show you instant results when you build things. And then you can save your code and share it as well. So that's a couple things. Let's see if this got in there. Boy, I am batting 1,000 today. Reload. So, yeah, usually this takes a second. Sometimes it's because of streaming. Let's blame streaming. Well, what the heck?
We're using a good fair amount of bandwidth.
Yeah. Anyway, what it does is normally you get a little window here, and it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go straight here. I'm going to close it. This is one of the cool things as well. A cool feature. I want to show you this cool feature. That's what I'm doing right now. No, I'm just. It's for some reason taking too long. But the nice thing about shell.azure.com is it's a code environment like the ones I just showed you. It's all interactive. It's all based on the web, and it picks up where you left off. So, and it has a whole bunch of storage. You can store your code. All right. So
and you can customize it just like you would on a local shell.
Yeah. Why is it doing that? Okay. For some reason, do you see that little flip? I kind of maybe I screwed it up from changing from PowerShell to Bash. I don't know. Anyway, it'll sort itself out.
Frank says your PC is probably very hot right now.
Probably. Frank's watching, huh? I knew you would. I knew you would. Okay. So let's talk about a few other things. So basically, next, once you've got the IDE sorted out, and we'll come back to the shell in a bit, and I'll show you what to do there. In fact, it ties in nicely with showing the other things. So you should start with tutorials. And because I work at Microsoft, I'm going to show you a .NET tutorial first. And here's the .NET tutorial. This is where you can literally learn .NET in 10 minutes. So .NET is a great, once again, one of those solid careers that has a lot of options, working in large enterprises or startups to build applications. Basically, there's an intro. You download and install a few things you need. You create an app. You run it. You edit your code, and then you can try other things. This only takes 10 minutes. It's a great way to get started with coding. If you don't know anything about coding at all, it's kind of a nice thing. And there's some videos here with some great folks who can show you details, some people you may have heard of before. And that's about it. So, but the other thing I want to show you, there's a lot more to do besides this. One of the places I recommend people start if they're just starting from zero when it comes to code is freecodecamp.org. As you can see here, it's sponsored by Microsoft. This is part of our skilling initiative as well. We're sponsoring a bunch of great third-party open source tools and sites. And they actually offer some certifications as well, but we'll get to certifications in a while. But if you want to get started with any applications, any code. You basically have to sign up. So this is another value of signing up for the other accounts, so you can continue with GitHub, for example. You can connect in there, and there's a bunch of interactive tutorials and things that you can use. 40,000 people have got jobs at other companies like this, and Microsoft does sponsor this site as well. But it's a great way to, let's say, Java. I don't know why I keep going to Java, but oh, actually, it's a terrible example. Look at that. I hate it when search results don't exclude JavaScript from Java, because they're not the same thing, by the way, for those of you who don't know. Let's go with Node.
It's a script.
But it's got nothing to do with Java. You guys, I won't get into the details. You can search the whole history if you're interested. But here, so there's all kinds of little projects you can do when you're working with Node. First thing, of course, is how to install Node. So let's get going with that. And these are all provided by different people. How to install Node, because you do actually have to install some things on your local machine. And you have to clean out that cache once in a while. It gets scary how much stuff it downloads, but try not to let that bother you. So the installation guide for Windows, Mac, and Linux is there. And this is the kind of thing. Now, if you go to Node.js, you can find Couchbase. There it is. You can find the instructions here. Sometimes those are not the greatest. So what do you want to do here, right? One of the words you're going to need, or one of the acronyms you're going to need to learn is LTS. LTS is long-term support. That means this is something that whoever builds it is standing behind. And LTS is, in this case, Node 12. So you download it. It knows what operating system I'm working on right now, but it would choose yours, Windows, Mac, or Linux. And then you can actually, you can choose to download the source code, the binaries and everything, or you can just use the Windows or Mac OS or Linux distributions for this. But more information, if you just are totally lost by looking at that website, because it's not really obvious, right? You click, click, click around. What do you do? Free Code Camp, this guy has actually put together a detailed installation instructions on how you actually install this, or upgrade or downgrade your Node version, because some packages need a certain version of Node to work. So Free Code Camp is a great place to start. You're going to learn the basics of programming, and you're going to have some working code. And you can use Visual Studio Code as an interactive tool for that. 100% everything in there is free. And now let's move on to cloud certifications and cloud information as well. So Microsoft Learn, if you just search Microsoft Learn, you're going to find all kinds of information about information that you need to not only become a great coder, but also understand how the cloud works, because that's the next thing. Now, not only do you need a cloud account, but you need to know how everything works. Okay, what's a virtual machine? How does a virtual machine actually work? How do I connect to a virtual machine and put my code on it and run it? What's a virtual network? What minimum security requirements do I have to build my application so that I don't get hacked within 30 seconds of putting this out in the public? That kind of thing is what you'll learn here at Microsoft Learn, among many other things. I'm just giving you some examples.
And it's got that scoring system too, so it's kind of fun to go in and just learn a new thing, even if it's not part of your job. Just the way that they've got it all set up. It's actually enjoyable to learn these things.
Yeah, so this is, I wouldn't recommend starting and Learn. If you've never worked with coding, I'd recommend starting with Free Code Camp and some of the other resources that I showed you, and then move on to Learn. And here is where you're going to get a lot of information and a lot of resources that'll help you not only learn, but get certified and get some certain, you keep track of things, they give you scores. It's a little bit of gamification they put into this. AZ900, I want to show you. So for example, let's say I want to learn the basics of the Azure cloud, the Microsoft cloud. Here's where you would go. So there's an Azure Fundamentals Learning Path. I just typed AZ900, which I know is the certification name that works with Azure Fundamentals, but you could just search Azure Fundamentals as well and you'll find it. Azure Fundamentals. So what they do is they start with cloud concepts, principles of cloud computing. This is 1 hour and 2 minutes. It's going to take about, it takes about 1 hour and 2 minutes, and it's 10 units. This is, creating an Azure account, core cloud services. This is going to answer all those questions I mentioned earlier about, basics of running your code on the cloud. Because really, you can run everything locally, and you can run everything off the grid totally if you have the right hardware. But these days, most people are running things in the cloud. They're putting their code on GitHub and either private or public repos, and then they're running it on a cloud. So if they actually have code or a website or something that needs to run, it's running somewhere on the cloud. So this is a great conversation for getting started and getting all the info you need. And over here, you see the points you get when you actually go through all this and get set up. So that's kind of cool. We also have docs. So docs, actually, if you just go to docs.com, and here's the, make that a little bigger. Here are the different topics that we have for docs. So .NET, ASP.NET, Azure, Azure Bot Service, interactive bots, DevOps for actually building CI/CD tools and things like that. And a lot of other technologies that you'll need, related information, Microsoft security. This is kind of cool. So we have all kinds of security documentation to help you get started. It's very important when you're sharing your code and running things on the cloud. So yeah, but those are the two places I would go. Learn, so search on Microsoft Learn or go to docs.com for documents. Those are really, really good resources. And last but not least, once you get into that, hey, there we go. The cloud's there. I'm going to come back to it in a second. Hopefully it's still there.
I dropped the link into chat also for the Azure Fundamentals learning path.
Cool. Thanks.
Everybody.
So, thank you. We got the .NET tutorial. So here's certifications. So there's another link. Jason, if you don't mind dropping that one in. This is for certifications at Microsoft. If you notice over here, I've checked developer and beginner, but there's also AI engineer, data scientist, solutions architect. So once again, we got all those resources I mentioned, all the data from Stack Overflow and GitHub, and then the free code camp and tutorials. Another way to figure out where you want to be is just check out some of these certifications and the fundamentals that you need related to these certifications. These are for beginners, and by beginner, they mean generally not someone who doesn't, you're going to have to understand a programming language, or at least have worked with the command line a little bit to basically get anything out of these certification guidelines. So that is something that's important. So when they say beginner, it's sort of yes and no. Yeah, but there's all kinds of exams here, Power Platform. Let's say AI Fundamentals. Here's another great one, AI 900. And you can find out, you can actually get a $99 exam for this. But we also have Learning Pass for these as well. So when you're going through the Learning Pass itself, you'll find, let's go back to Learn here. So AI 900, let's do the same thing again, search AI 900. So this is in Learn.
A quick time check. We've got about 6 minutes or so before we're out of time.
All right, so I do want to show you that last little thing. So this is going back to I showed you JSBen and CodePen, these other sites that you can work with code. And I showed you CodeSpaces, which you have to pay a small fee for, but this is a free option. So once you get your Azure account, which has 12 months free features, you get access to shell.azure.com. And if I go in here, I can do things like, this is in Bash. There's Bash and PowerShell. But I can actually list things. As you see here, I already have some code in here that is out on the cloud. Now, if I want to see this in more detail, code dot. So this actually opens a little simple version of Visual Studio Code. It's not as robust as the version that you get in Visual Studio CodeSpaces, and it's definitely not as robust as the version you get from downloading the client. Excuse me. But you can do all kinds of things here. So I went up to GitHub before, and let's go to a different repo actually, because I think I've already cloned this one. So blah, blah, blah. I need a public repo because I haven't. When you connect to GitHub through the Cloud Shell, you're connecting from the cloud out to GitHub. So it won't have my credentials here. So what I need to do is I need to go to my repositories, and I need to find a public repo that I haven't used before. Let's go with this one. And I mentioned before you can fork this. So in this case, I've already forked it. I forked it from Microsoft Ignite Learning Pass Training Apps. This is some code that we put out for this tour we did called Microsoft Ignite the Tour back in the days when we traveled. Anyway, the reason why I'm showing you this, I mentioned before, you can clone this. You can clone it to your local machine, excuse me, or you can clone it to Cloud Shell. So let's go in there. Azure Cloud Shell. So this is code. This is all the code I have over here. And then I can say git clone. Now you'll notice that I don't have the GitHub. Excuse me. My throat is going. I don't have the extensions, the little extensions bar that I have over here. So that's one of the limitations of working with the Cloud Shell. But once I have this set up, I can say Ignite Learning Pass Training Apps should be here. Let's refresh this. How do you refresh this again? Is this one? Nope. Darn it.
Ryan, while you're looking for that, we've got someone in chat.
No, it's right there.
We've got someone who in chat was asking about links to the certification learning credits. Was that something that was in your blog post? Is there someplace I can grab a link about? Did you mention something about learning credits, or was it just the learning courses that you pointed out?
Learning credits. So I think I mentioned Microsoft Learn Points system. I'll show that in a sec. But so I've got this, I just cloned this. So it's not on my repo anymore. It's actually on my local Cloud Shell storage. And I can go in here and I can change something like this. I can mess around with it. The only limitation of the Cloud Shell is you can play around with code and you can edit things, but you can't run anything in here. You can upload and you can download things to your repo. And you can create a new cloud. You can do all kinds of searches, but there's not a lot. Like you're limited in what you can do with shell.azure.com. The nice thing is it's totally free with a free trial connection. So I did want to show that, and it has Bash and PowerShell as the underlying. If you look down here on the this is a code. This is a command line down here, and it's console, so I could actually work with the code I have up here. So I can say cd ignite, and tab works and a few other things. But anyway, you get the idea. You can play around with this. This is a code editor, totally free, shell.azure.com. Or you can download Visual Studio Code, or you can use Code Spaces. So from GitHub or from Visual Studio. All right, so getting back to the question about, let's close that. No, I won't close it in case I need it.
Hey, but another question too is with the storage that gets associated with Cloud Shell.
Yeah.
How is that? Is that something that? What's the cost of that?
Oh, there's no cost for that storage. I believe it's 5 gigabytes. Don't quote me on that, but I believe you get 5 gigabytes of free storage that you can use there. And the nice thing is you can work with it from there. So, oh, the Azure CLI, I forgot to mention that. So what can you do with that? CLI. So the Azure CLI is actually a tool that's written in Python. It's open source, and it allows you to interact with the Azure Cloud Platform. So I can say something. If I go back to my, glad I didn't close that. See, I can go to the Cloud Shell, and I can say like AZ VM question mark, and it'll give me, oops, AZ VM. Let's just break it. Okay, there you go. So what it does here, pull that up. AZVM is the command you use in the Azure CLI. It's pre-installed in your Cloud Shell. You don't have to install this, along with Terraform and Docker and a bunch of other things already pre-installed in here. So I can create a virtual machine from here using the AZVM command. AZAKS works with our Azure Kubernetes service, other things like that. So I can clone something from my GitHub repo. I can put it in here. I can play around with it. And then I can actually post that or push it using SCP or something else to my virtual machine. And if all this is getting beyond what you know, don't worry about it. This is just a cool thing that you can do. So the bottom line,
real quick, because we're going to run out of time. We have like 10 seconds.
Yes. Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, getting back to the learn question, was about the points. So learn is more about learn points, and you collect points, and you get learn. I guess credentials, but you don't necessarily get certifications. So just want to let you know about that.
Cool. Well, I'm going to end it there, Brian, so much. So thank you so much for being on here. And thank you to everybody who's joined us. And hopefully we'll see you again real soon. Take care.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jason.
Bye.